Remus Lupin was born on March 10th, 1960. He was the only child of the wizard Lyle Lupin and his muggle wife Hope Howe. Before I start with Remus, let's explore his parents first. Lyle Lupin worked on non-human spirituous apparitions. These include strange creatures like poltergeists and boggarts. These creatures still remain a mystery even to the wizarding world. On a trip into a thick Welsh forest, Lyle was searching for a particularly vicious boggart. While on his trip, Lyle ran into his future wife, Hope Howe. Hope was a beautiful muggle girl who was walking through what she believed to be an innocent woodland. Boggarts and poltergeists can be sensed by muggles, and Hope, an imaginative and sensitive person, had become convinced that something was watching her. Eventually, Hope's imagination became so overactive that the boggart took form of her greatest fear. A large, evil-looking man. Hearing her scream, Lyle came sprinting through the trees. With one wave of his wand, the apparition turned into harmless field mushrooms. Lyle told Hope that it was only a boggart. This, however, made no impression on her. Noticing how very beautiful Hope was, Lyle made the decision not to talk about boggarts anymore and accompany her home to protect her. The young couple fell in love, and to Lyle's delight, Hope accepted his proposal of marriage and started the preparations for the wedding, complete with a boggart-topped cake. Now, let's move on to Remus. Lyle and Hope's first and only child, Remus, was born after a year of marriage. Remus was a happy and healthy little boy. He also showed signs of magic and was soon going to attend Hogwarts. By the time Remus was 4 years old, the amount of dark magical activity across the country was increasing steadily. Lord Voldemort was known to be recruiting dark creatures to join them and later overthrow the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry called in the services on dark creatures to help it understand and contain the threat. Lyle Lupin was among those asked to join the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, which he did gladly. It was here that Lyle came face to face with a werewolf called Fenrir Greyback, who had been brought in for questioning about the death of 2 Muggle children. Werewolves were so shunned by Wizarding Society that they generally avoided contact with other people. Greyback, whom the Ministry did not know to be a werewolf, claimed to be nothing more than a Muggle tramp, who was utterly amazed at finding himself in a room full of wizards and horrified by the talk about the dead children. Greyback's filthy clothing and lack of wine were sufficient to persuade 2 overworked and ignorant members of the questioning committee that he was telling the truth. But Lyle Lupin was not so easily fooled. He recognized signs in Greyback's appearance and behavior and told the committee that Greyback ought to be kept in detention until the next full moon, mere 24 hours later. Greyback sat in silence while Lyle was laughed at by his fellow committee members. Lyle grew angry. He described werewolves as soulless, evil, deserving nothing but death. The committee ordered Lyle out of the room. The head of the committee apologized to the Muggle tramp, and Greyback was released. The wizard who had escorted Greyback out of the inquiry was intending to put a memory charm upon him so that he would forget having been inside the Ministry. Before he had a chance to do so, He is overpowered by Greyback and two accomplices who had been lurking at the entrance, and the three werewolves fled. Greyback lost no time in sharing with his friends how Lyle Lupin had just described them. Their revenge on the wizard who thought that werewolves deserved nothing but death would be terrible. Shortly before Remus's fifth birthday, as he slept in bed, Fenrir Greyback forced open the boy's window and attacked him. Lyle reached the bedroom in time to save his son's life, driving Greyback out of the house with a number of powerful curses. However, Remus would still be a full werewolf. Lyle Lupin never forgave himself for the words he had spoken in front of Greyback at the inquiry. Soulless, evil, deserving nothing but death. He had parroted what was the common view of werewolves in his community, but his son was what he had always been, lovable and clever, except for the terrible period at the full moon when he suffered an excruciating transformation and became a danger to everyone around him. For many years, Lyle kept the truth about the attack, including the identity of the attacker, from his son. Lyle did all he could to find a cure, but neither potions or spell could help his son. From this time onwards, the family's lives were dominated by the need to hide Remus's condition. They uprooted themselves from village to town, leaving the instant that rumors of the boy's odd behavior started. Fellow witches and wizards noticed how peaky Remus had become as new moon approached, not to mention his monthly disappearances. Remus was not allowed to play with other children in case he let slip the truth of his condition. In consequence, and in spite of his loving parents, he was a very lonely boy. While Remus was small, his containment during his transformation was not difficult. A locked room and plenty of silencing spells usually sufficed. However, as he grew, so did his wolfish self, and by the time he was 10 years old, he was capable of pounding down doors and smashing windows. Ever more powerful spells were needed to contain him, and both Hope and Lyle grew thin with worry and fear. The hopes that they had once had for their son seemed in ruins, and Lyle educated Remus at home, certain that he would never be able to set foot in school. Shortly before Remus's 11th birthday, no less a person than Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, arrived uninvited on the Lupin's doorstep. Flustered and frightened, Lyle and Hope tried to block his entrance, but somehow 5 minutes later, Dumbledore was sitting at the fireside eating crumpets, playing gobstones with Remus. Dumbledore explained to the Lupins that he knew what had happened to their son. Greyback had boasted of what he had done, and Dumbledore spies among dark creatures. However, Dumbledore told the Lupins that he saw no reason why Remus should not come to school, and described the arrangements that he made to give the boy a safe and secure place for his transformations. Due to the widespread prejudice around werewolves, Dumbledore agreed that for Remus's own sake, his condition should not be broadcast. Once a month, he would leave for a secure and comfortable house in the village of Hogsmeade, guarded by many spells and reached only by an underground passage from the Hogwarts grounds, where he could transform in peace. Remus's excitement was beyond anything he had known before. It was the dream of his life to meet other children and for the first time, friends and playmates. Sorted into Gryffindor House, Remus was swiftly befriended by two cheerful, confident, and rebellious boys named Potter and Sirius Black. They were attracted by Remus's quiet sense of humor and the kindness that they valued, even if they did not always possess it themselves. Remus was also kind to short and rather slow Peter Pettigrew, a fellow Gryffindor whom James and Sirius might not have thought worthy of their intention without Remus's persuasion. Soon, these four became inseparable. Remus functioned as the conscience of this group, but it was occasionally a faulty conscience. He did not approve of their relentless bullying of Severus Snape. But he loved James and Sirius so much and was so grateful for their acceptance that he did not always stand up to them as much as he knew he should. Automatically, his three best friends soon became curious to why Remus had to vanish once a month. Convinced by his lonely childhood that his friends would desert him if they knew he was a werewolf, Remus made up ever more elaborate lies to account for his absences. James and Sirius guessed the truth in their second year. To Remus's astonished gratitude, they not only remained his friends, but thought up an ingenious method of easing his monthly isolation. They also gave him a nickname that would follow him all through school: Moody. By the time the four friends left school, Lord Voldemort's dominance was almost complete. True resistance to him was concentrated in the underground organization called the Order of the Phoenix, which all four young men joined. The death of James Potter, along with his wife Lily, at the hands of Lord Voldemort was one of the most disturbing events of Remus's already troubled life. His friends meant even more to him than to other people, because he had long since accepted the fact that most people would treat him as untouchable, and that there was no possibility of marrying and having children. Even worse, within 24 hours, he had also lost his two other best friends. Remus was in the north of the country of the Order the Phoenix business when he heard the horrible news that one of them had murdered the other and was now in Azkaban, a traitor to the Order and to Lily and James themselves. The downfall of Voldemort marked the beginning of a long stretch of loneliness and happiness for Remus. He had lost his three close friends, and with the Order disbanded, his previous companions returned to busy lives with families. His mother was now dead, and while Lyle, his father, was always delighted to see his son, Remus refused to endanger his father's peaceful existence by returning to live with him. Remus now lived a hand-to-mouth existence, taking jobs that were far below his level of ability, always knowing that he would have to leave them before his pattern of growing sick once a month at the full moon was noticed by his workmates. One development in the wizarding community gave Remus hope: the discovery of the wolfsbane potion. While this did not prevent a werewolf losing his human form once a month, it restricted his transformation to that of an ordinary and sleepy wolf. It had always been Remus's worst fear that he would kill while out of his right mind. However, the wolfsbane potion was complex and the ingredients were very expensive. Remus had no chance to sample it without admitting what he was, and so he continued his lonely existence. Once again, Albus Dumbledore changed the course of Remus's life when he tracked him down to a cottage in Yorkshire. Delighted to see the headmaster, Remus was amazed when Dumbledore offered him the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. He was only persuaded to accept when Dumbledore explained that there would be a limitless supply of wolfsbane potion. At Hogwarts, Remus revealed himself to be a gifted teacher. With a rare flair for his own subject and a great understanding of his pupils, he was, as ever, particularly drawn to both Neville Longbottom and Harry Potter, benefited from his wisdom and kindness. However, Remus's old fool was at work. He had grave suspicion about one of his old friends, but did not share them with anyone at Hogwarts. His desperate desire to belong and to be liked meant that he was neither as brave nor as honest as he ought to have been. An unfortunate combination of circumstances arose that resulted in Remus undergoing a true werewolf transformation in the grounds of school. Severus Snape's resentment made sure that it was widely known what the defense against the dark arts teacher was. Remus felt forced to resign and depart Hogwarts once more. As Lord Voldemort once again gained ascendancy, the old resistance regrouped, and Remus found himself once more part of the Order of the Phoenix. This time the group included an aura: clever, brave, funny, pink-haired Nymphadora Tonks. Remus so oftenly was first amused, then impressed, then seriously smitten by the young witch. He had never fallen in love before. If it happened in peacetime, Remus would have simply taken himself off to a new place and a new job so that he did not have to endure the pain of watching Tonks fall in love with a handsome young wizard in the Auror office, which was what he expected to happen. However, this was war. They were both needed in the Order of the Phoenix, and nobody knew what the next day would bring. Remus felt justified in remaining exactly where he was, keeping his feelings to himself. It never occurred to Remus that Tonks could return his feelings, because he had become so used to considering himself unclean and unworthy. One night, when they lay in hiding outside a known Death Eater's house, Tonks made an idle remark about one of their fellow Order members. Before he could stop himself, Remus had replied bitterly that he supposed she had fallen for his old friend. At this, Tonks became suddenly angry. "You know perfectly well who I've fallen for, if you weren't too busy feeling sorry for yourself to notice," she said. Remus's immediate response was a happiness he had never experienced in his life, but this was extinguished almost at once by a sense of crushing duty. He had always known that he could not marry and run the risk of passing on his painful, shameful condition. He therefore pretended not to understand Tonks, which did not fool her at all. Wiser than Remus, she was sure that he loved her, but that he was refusing to admit it out of mistaken nobility. However, he avoided any further excursions with her, barely talked to her, and started volunteering for the most dangerous missions. Tonks became desperately unhappy, convinced not only that Remus would never willingly spend time with her again, but also that he might walk to his death rather than admit his feelings. Remus and Tonks both fought Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries, a battle that resulted in the public exposure of Voldemort's return. The loss of the last of his school friends during this battle did nothing to soften Remus's increasingly self-destructive attitude. Tonks could only watch in despair as he volunteered to spy for the Order, leaving to live among fellow werewolves to try to persuade them to Dumbledore's side. In doing this, he was exposing himself to the possible revenge of the werewolf who changed his life forever, Fenrir Greyback. Remus came face to face with both Greyback and Tonks at Hogwarts barely a year later, when the Order clashed with Death Eaters within the castle. During this battle, Remus lost yet another person he had loved, Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore had been adored by every member of the Order of the Phoenix, but to Remus he had represented the sort of kindness, tolerance, and understanding that he had received from nobody in the world outside his parents and his 3 best friends, and had been the only man ever to offer him a position without normal Wizarding Society. In the aftermath of the fight, inspired by Fleur Delacour's protestation of enduring love for Bill Weasley, who had been savaged by Greyback, Tonks made a brave public declaration of her feelings for Remus, who was forced to admit the strength of his love for her. In spite of continuing misgivings that he was acting selfishly, Remus married Tonks quietly in the north of Scotland. He continued to fear that the stigma attached to him would infect his wife and wished for no fanfare around their union. He swung constantly between elation that he was married to the woman of his dreams and terror of what he might have brought upon them. Within a few weeks of their marriage, Remus realized that Tonks was pregnant, and every fear he had ever surfaced. He was convinced that he'd passed on his condition to an innocent child, and that he had condemned Tonks to the same life as his mother, forever moving around, unable to settle, having to hide her increasingly violent child from sight. Full of remorse and self-recrimination, Remus fled, leaving Tonks seeking out Harry and offering to accompany him on whatever death-defying adventure awaited. To Remus's shock and displeasure, the 17-year-old Harry not only declined his offer but became angry and insulting. He told Remus that he was acting selfishly and irresponsibly. Remus responded with violence and stormed out of the house, taking refuge in a corner of the leaky cauldron where he sat drinking and fuming. However, after a few hours' reflection, Remus was forced to accept that Harry had just taught him a valuable lesson. James and Lily, Remus reflected, had stuck with Harry even until their own deaths. His own parents, Lyle and Hope, had sacrificed their peace and security to keep the family together. Bitterly ashamed, Remus left the inn and returned to his wife, where he begged her forgiveness and assured that, come what may, he would never leave her again. The Lupin's son, Edward Lupin, was named for Remus's recently deceased father-in-law. To both parents' relief and delight, he showed no signs of being a werewolf when born, but inherited his mother's ability to change his appearance at will. On the night of Teddy's birth, Remus briefly left Tonks and his son in charge of his mother-in-law so that he could go and find Harry for the first time since the angry confrontation. Here, he asked Harry to be Teddy's godfather, feeling nothing but forgiveness and gratitude towards the person who sent him home to the family that gave him his greatest happiness. Both Remus and Tonks returned to Hogwarts for the final battle against Voldemort, leaving their tiny son in the care of his grandmother. The couple knew that if Voldemort won this battle, their family was sure to be eliminated. Having survived numerous encounters with Death Eaters and fought his way skillfully and bravely out of many tight corners, Remus Lupin met his end at the hands of Dolohop, one of the longest-serving, most devoted of all Voldemort's Death Eaters. Remus was no longer in prime fighting condition when he rushed to join the fight, Months of inactivity using mostly spells of concealment and protection had blunted his dueling capabilities, and when he ran up against a jeweler of Dolhoff's skill, now battle-hardened, after months of killing, his reactions were too slow. Remus Lupin was awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, the first werewolf ever to be accorded this honor. He was never forgotten by anyone who knew him, a brave, kind man who did the best he could in very difficult circumstances, and who helped many more than he ever realized.